Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sian. Welcome to the first episode of 2026. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope everyone had an amazing holiday season and you're ready to rock it this year in 2026. And as always, I want to say a big thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast, whether this is your first time listening or it's your 206th time listening, because this is the 206th episode. I am always so grateful for you taking the time. I know there's a million things you could be doing, but the fact that you choose to spend this time with me is amazing, and I'm eternally grateful for it. And of course, always have a big favor to ask. Even though I'm grateful for all the support, I'm asking for more. If you get any value from it, please do share with a friend, put it on LinkedIn, put a screenshot up on Instagram, send a link to a friend, text them, let them know we're having these conversations. The goal of the podcast, if you've listened, you've heard me say this over and over, is to really help the profession to grow, to help us, support us, our colleagues, our profession, and everybody within eye care. So I'm hoping that today's episode will support you in some way, one way or another. This is for the first episode of the year. I thought I'd go back to doing an Eye2Eye episode. If you listen to the podcast, you know an Eye2Eye episode it's just me, a little one-on-one, us having a conversation, usually me sharing some lessons that I've learned, some inspiration that I've gained, anything that I feel might be relevant to somebody who's listening. Again, whether it's one small facet of your life, maybe it's your personal life, maybe your professional life, or maybe on a grander scale across the profession, wherever this might be helpful, I just hope it can resonate with somebody out there. You know, at the end of 2025, last year, at the end of 2024, I did a recap episode, and I recapped the top 5 episodes of 2024. As a popular episode, because I think a lot of people are interested to hear which episodes did well, which guests did well. I actually had recorded one at the end of 2025, so just a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't get around to editing and posting it. And one of the rules I kind of made for myself with the podcast was I got to be okay with not posting from time to time. The podcast accomplished a lot of things last year. We hit a lot of milestones, and I want to share some of those with you. But first, before I get into that, I do want to share with you the top 5 episodes of 2025. And if you haven't listened to these, I want you to go back and check them out, because they were amazing episodes. And I'm really glad that they got as much traction, they got as many views and listens as they did, because they're all very important episodes that we're going to talk about here. So let's start with number 5, from the top 5 episodes of 2025. That is the episode on scope expansion or scope optimization with Dr. Evelyn Lowe, who is the president of the BC Doctors of Optometry, and Dr. Sarah McIver from the University of Waterloo. At number 4 was another scope expansion or scope optimization conversation with Dr. Shaina Nenzi, the president of the Ontario Association, and Dr. Sophia Leung, the president of the Alberta Association. I want to take a second to acknowledge that 2 of the 6 or 8 episodes that we had on discussions on scope expansion, 2 of them ended up in the top 5 of all the episodes of the year. And there were, as we're going to touch on in a little bit, as I share some of our milestones from last year, there were a lot of people listening. And so it's amazing that these 2 ended up in the top 5, because for me, this was the most important discussion that we had all year. This is currently the most important discussion that we're having across the entire country. So I'm really, really glad that our colleagues and our friends across the country have taken the time to listen. Really interesting. A couple of these episodes actually got a little traction in the ophthalmology space as well. Maybe not for quite the right reasons, but it's interesting to hear that that we may be kind of, people's ears are perking while we're having these important conversations. So anyways, really glad to see that those 2 episodes ended up in the top 5. Now, number 3, I'm not surprised this one ended up in the top 5. It was the optical sales expert himself, Connor Heaney from Manchester, UK, who is an optometrist, a business owner, clinic owner, but he also runs his own consulting slash training service that's called the Optical Success Academy. And Connor came on and shared some amazing insights on marketing, building your business, team growth, and training and stuff like that within your practice. I have implemented a lot of the stuff, not just that I learned from that episode, but from that program, the OSA program as well. So I'm not surprised that came in at number 3 as the 3rd most listened to or viewed episode of the year. The second most listened to or viewed episode of the year was probably the most controversial episode of the year, which is the episode with Dr. Bryce Applebaum, who's based in the DMV area around Washington, D.C. And I deliberately gave this one a bit of a clickbaity title because I think it deserved a lot of attention. Now, it probably would have ended up at number 2 without the clickbait title, to be honest with you, because the conversation was awesome. But the title was something like "Pencil push-ups are good and patching is bad." But Bryce has really made a name for himself, really made a huge name for himself in the kind of biohacking space, self-improvement, health space. He's ended up on a lot of big podcasts like Dave Asprey, Rangan Chatterjee, which are a couple of the bigger podcasts across the globe. So really great episode. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend that you listen to it. And I think if you listen to it, go in with a bit of an open mind. I won't be surprised if you listen and you feel a little annoyed and you want to reach through your screen and maybe strangle Bryce a little bit, but he knows that. He knows that and he's okay with that. And I think at the end of the day, we'll all come out learning a little bit from that episode. So Bryce Applebaum at number 2. And number 1, the most listened to and viewed episode of 2025 was the red light therapy episode with Dr. Graham Mary, who is an MD based in the UK. And he's a co-founder of a product called Aruna Light. And also he's co-founded other products in that red light space. He's done a lot of research in that space, and he's teaching a lot of people very important information in that space. I'm not surprised this one came in at number 1. It was a great episode with a lot of great information. But what I think is a really important takeaway from this episode is that this topic, red light, is such a big topic right now, not just amongst optometrists and healthcare professionals, but in the public across the world. Our patients are interested in this topic. So I would like to share that as a little insight. That's something you might want to be comfortable discussing with your patients, maybe bringing it up preemptively because it's already something people are talking about. And it might end up getting you a little bit more interest from your patients. They might be impressed that their optometrist is so knowledgeable in this topic. So anyways, those were the top 5 episodes. There were the 2 episodes on scope expansion. There was the episode on marketing with Connor Heaney, the controversial episode with Bryce Applebaum, and finally, the red light episode coming in at number 1 with Dr. Graham Mary. There were a few other things I wanted to share with you about the podcast in 2025. Humbly, the podcast did very well. There was a lot of growth. It reached a lot of milestones that I honestly never expected to reach when I started the podcast towards the end of 2019. So just over 6 years ago. I really didn't know where it was going to go. I figured maybe a dozen or so people, maybe 100 people might listen, and even 100 was a big number for me back at that time. But I really wanted to share with you what we achieved last year, because you, the listener and the viewer, are the reason that we hit these milestones. So I want to take this moment to say a big thank you to those of you who have taken the time out of your lives to spend this time here, to listen to me, to tune in and to share with your friends. The podcast hit over 50,000 total listens across platforms last year. We published 40 episodes, which was the most episodes we've published in a year. Previous to that, I think maybe I'd hit 30 max. I think 25 probably. Kind of one every 2 weeks is sort of the pace I was on for a couple of years there. So to hit 40 in a single year was amazing. Would have been 41 if I published that last wrap-up episode, right? I had recorded 41, but I didn't publish that last one. And of course, if you're familiar, you might know already that we hit our 200th episode last year. Of course, I'm saying this is episode 206. And the 200th episode was with Dr. Jennifer Lyerly. It was such a great episode. I am a big fan of Jen's and her blog, and of course, Defocus Media with Daryl, who's one of my best friends in the industry. Jen came on about a year and a half earlier. We did an initial episode where we talked a bit about specialty contact lenses, sclerals, Ortho-K. And at that time, I had either maybe hit fit 1 or 2, or I had actually maybe fit 0. But Jen inspired me. And on that podcast, I called myself out. I challenged myself a little bit that I'm going to start fitting specialty contact lenses. And in the ensuing 18 months or so, I did fit, I don't know, probably a dozen or so sclerals and 20 or 30 Ortho-K. And man, it reinvigorated me in my practice. It's become one of my absolute favorite things to do, is to fit specialty contact lenses. And I have some really exciting stories I want to share about that, which I will, in the coming weeks. but we kind of we revisited some of that, and and the second episode of the 200th episode, Jen gave some really great insights into building a myopia practice and the costs and the risks and the benefits and all these other things, and kind of the metrics of it all. Really great episode for our 200th episode. All right, so that's a little wrap up. That was kind of the wrap up I wanted to give you in the episode that I had recorded, but I wanted to wrap up 2025 before we went into 2026. Again, I wanted to say a huge thank you. All these milestones that we've reached, I'm so grateful to our audience. I'm grateful, of course, to my family, my friends, my colleagues, everyone who supported along the way, and to our industry partners. I would like to name them, but I'm going to refrain from doing that because there's a lot of them that have really supported the podcast over the years. And it kind of waxes and wanes on which ones are involved and which ones are not at any given time. Last year, we really had a couple of key sponsors that supported the podcast heavily and in ways that we've never been supported before. But anyways, any sponsor, any industry partner that has supported the podcast throughout the years and will be continued to, or any upcoming sponsors that are going to support us in the coming years, I'm truly grateful. We do have some interesting partnerships coming up this year and some amazing topics. So please stay tuned for all of that. Now, I've given you 10 or 12 minutes of a wrap up. I didn't even tell you what we're going to be talking about in this episode, but if you read the title, you know. This episode is about the 6 lessons that I'm bringing in from 2025 into 2026. 6 lessons that maybe I learned for the first time, or maybe I relearned or were ingrained again in me last year that I feel like are really important for me to bring into 2026. And I'm hoping that by me sharing these lessons with you, that it'll resonate in some way and it'll help you to have a great year this year, whether it's personally, professionally, or even more broadly. I'm going to talk a little bit across the profession as well, industry wide, how we might be able to improve our profession in 2026. You know, I find at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, right around at New Year, you know, people are making resolutions and things like that. But I always find that there's really 2 main camps of people at the end of a year. One camp is, man, I can't wait to put this year behind me. Things didn't go the way I wanted. I want this year in my rear view right away, ASAP. And then there's another group, another camp that says, wow, that last year was amazing. I want to carry this momentum into the new year. I want to take whatever I was doing right this year and take it into the new year and smash it out of the park again in 2026. And I think no matter which camp you're in, there's lessons to be learned and there's lessons to bring into the new year, whether they were hard learned lessons or maybe they were big wins that you had, whatever they were. But I think that we shouldn't entirely wipe the slate clean. I think we should come into the new year taking some lessons from the previous year and helping them, using them to help ourselves grow this year. So some of these lessons that I'm going to share with you, my lessons that I'm going to share with you, they kind of come from both sides. They come from sort of those hard learned lessons, and some of them are lessons that have kind of grown over time, and I've learned, as things have gone well, including things with the podcast. So let's dive in to the 6 lessons that I'm bringing in to 2026 from 2025. Lesson number 1, and this is very relevant to all this discussion I just had with you about the podcast and how the podcast hit these milestones in 2025. Lesson number 1 is that consistency is key. Consistency is the king of all things. And whether that's your workout regimen, whether that's financially speaking, whether it's your relationships, whether that's your business, consistency is key. And this is an age-old lesson. It's not new, but I was learning this in various ways in 2025 over again, and it was really resonating with me in the past year or so. And I'll share a couple of examples of where, primarily the podcast, which I just shared with you. These things, hitting 50,000 listens in a year, 40 episodes, 200th episode, all these things didn't just happen in 2025 or because of things that I did in 2025. They were because I stuck with it. I stuck with it over 6 years. I kept making content. And eventually, it's slow growth, and eventually it tends to hockey stick. And the same kind of thing happens if you think about financially, you're investing. We talk about compound interest. That's all about consistency. We talk about our fitness goals. You don't just get into shape overnight or over a week or over a month. You look at somebody who's in amazing shape. It's because they've been doing it for many months or years, more likely. And I want to tell a little story about this. Actually, let me, before I go into that, share a quick anecdote, share a quick quote on that. There's a quote from Bill Gates from many years back, and he said, we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, and we underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years or in a decade. And I think that is the the core of that message is consistency. We try really hard for a year, we don't hit what we want to hit, so we stop. We overestimate what we can accomplish. But if we kept up even a slower pace than what we started out, we usually start out the gate real hot and we try to achieve our goals right away. But even if we started at a little bit slower pace, but we maintained it, it's the rabbit and the hare, excuse me, the tortoise and the hare story, right? If we kind of maintain that pace over years and years, we would more likely hit even greater goals than we anticipated, than we even expected. Um, a little story, personal story, 10, 12 years back, maybe around that amount of time, I was doing some YouTube stuff. You may have seen it where I had my counterpart named Dr. Einstein. I was making these YouTube videos and I really enjoyed making them. Um, and I coincidentally had the opportunity to meet a YouTuber who was doing very, very well. His name was Just Rain, JusReign. He was very popular in the South Asian community. But back then in like 2010, 2012, he had like 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a huge number, especially back then. And, he made these comedy, he was doing comedy, made a lot of these videos, quirky, silly. Some of them were outrageous, and you would just be like, that's silly. I'm not going to watch that. But any case, he was doing very well. And I had a chance to meet him briefly. And I asked him, what's one thing you would tell somebody like me who's kind of starting out and I have this YouTube channel I'm trying to grow? And he said, one thing, he said, consistency. That's it. Not about the lighting, not about the microphone, not about your camera, not about any of that stuff. It's just consistency. And I would agree now, especially given how much the podcast has grown. Consistency really has been key. I tell a lot of times, I tell this story. I had Dr. Claudine Curry on not too long ago. She comes on she's a regular on the podcast. But in December, I posted an interview that I did with her, and she flipped the script and she asked me some questions, and she wanted to ask me about the origins of the podcast, but we didn't really actually end up visiting it in that conversation. She asked me after we got off air, she said, I wanted you to tell the story of how the podcast started. What were you doing? What were you using? What did it look like? Because I was asking her a couple of years back when she first came on about the origins of Eye Drop Shop and what did it look like? What did your living room look like? What did your garage look like? And she wanted to flip that question on me, and I didn't get around to answering it. So this one's for Claudine. I want to quickly share this. Um, because it didn't look like this. Now, this is not the most fancy setup, but this backdrop I had specifically put together for the podcast. I purchased this mic, I have a camera, I have all these things, and I edit and all this kind of stuff. But when I first started the podcast, I purchased these cheap wired microphones that would plug into my phone. It would have like it would split into two mics. So I'd put one on me and I put one on my guest. We'd always film in person. The first 10 or 12 episodes were all in person. And that cost me $30 off Amazon. These same lights that I use right now, these box lights, I bought them off of Amazon for like $70 Canadian dollars, by the way, guys. If you're a US person listening, that's like $2 US. And that was it. That was my main investment. I had a camera that I was using, a digital camera that I just had from years before my wife had bought me because I wanted to start making those YouTube videos. Anyway, you could have used your phone, you could have used whatever. But the point is, it was very cheap. It was very basic. There was nothing fancy about it. And that's what I did for the first 6 months or so. And then COVID hit. And then I had to switch it up. And then I just used my laptop and my webcam. And then when I restarted up again after COVID, then I thought, okay, I need to upgrade my equipment a little bit. Then I started looking into better microphones and that kind of thing. But that wasn't until probably 2 years into doing the podcast. So it really started like that. So the success of the podcast didn't come from purchasing all sorts of fancy equipment. It came from just continuing to put out the content, no matter what kind of quality instrumentation I had. So really, number one big lesson that I'm bringing into this year is consistency is key. And I want to try to be as consistent as I can in every aspect of my life. And I'd encourage you to do the same. Lesson number two that I'm bringing into 2026 from 2025 is that we got to make the most of each and every day. Again, this is not a new lesson, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times. But I heard something on another podcast just recently, and then I ended up having this conversation with my friends and family about it. And it just, I don't know, for whatever reason, just kind of stuck with me. But, there's a lot of times we'll hear somebody say, what would you do if today was your last day? Or if you only had a week to live, how would you live your life? Go out and live your life like that. But I don't feel like that's really realistic, right? Imagine you only had a couple of days to live. Would you go to work? Would you do anything productive really? Or would you just enjoy your time with your family? Would you just make the most of these moments, precious moments that you had left? And, enjoy a couple of pleasures and things that you'd really want to make the most of those couple of days. But that wouldn't really be productive over a matter of months or years, right? We can't just go out every day and just live it like it was our last. Now, hopefully, it won't be your last, and hopefully, you have many, many, many more days to go. But if you rewind and you just look at the previous 365 days, what did they look like? Most of the days kind of look the same. So I want to flip that over and I want to say, live every day like it was going to be the same day, like almost like Groundhog Day. You're repeating the same thing over and over. Now, how would you make the most of that day? And that's, I think, you know, life tends to get a little mundane. It tends to get a little boring. And it's easy to kind of give into that and say, well, it's just another boring day. But if we can make the most of it, if we can try to savor every interaction as if it was our last day, but enjoy every interaction, shake a hand, pay a compliment, whatever it might be, say the nice thing, give a hug, make that phone call, send that text. We can do that on any given day. It doesn't have to be the last day that we're alive or the last week that we have on earth. But if we did that every day, we could certainly make the most of each and every day. And it reminded me actually of a movie that I've seen in the past. You may have seen this as well. It's called About Time. And it's about this guy. It's a quirky kind of rom-com-y kind of movie. I actually really enjoyed it. But it's about a guy, quirky guy, who finds out he can travel in time, travel back and forth. And he finds out from his dad, because his dad's able to travel backwards in time as well. And he tells him, he can do it. And so, of course, throughout the movie, he's finding all these weird situations where he made a mistake. He wanted to talk to a girl. He said the wrong thing. So he'd step in a closet, go back 30 minutes and talk to her again, or whatever it might be. But ultimately, he finds out there's limitations to it, of course. And the big lesson, bit of a spoiler alert here, if you haven't seen the movie, I apologize. It's still worth seeing. But the big lesson at the end of the movie was his dad told him is that instead of going back every time you make a mistake, try to live the entire day all the way through, make all the mistakes, live through those boring moments or whatever might have happened. And then at the end of the day, go back to the beginning and live it again as if each of those moments was precious, and that you could turn every little dull moment into an exciting moment. And it's really kind of cool to watch. He smiles at that person on the train, or he gives that other person a helping hand, or he makes his coworker feel better after they just got reprimanded by the boss. All these little moments where he could have made the day better, he goes ahead and does it the second time around. But we have the chance to do that every single day. So that's the lesson I want to bring in, a big lesson I want to bring into 2026 is we don't need to live like every day is our last day. We need to live like every day is the same day, and we want to make the most of it. Lesson number 3 that I'm bringing into 2026 from 2025 is to try to avoid complacency. This is sort of the flip side of consistency, right? We all tend to get complacent sometimes. I know I do. I definitely have. In 2025, I had my moments, and I talk about this on the podcast. I talk about this in lectures that I give. There are many, many times in our lives where we'll be riding these waves, right? Sometimes you're at the top of the wave and you're riding high, and sometimes you're down in a valley, and you're kind of down there. You don't really know what to do with yourself. Sometimes you don't realize. So sometimes you might be at that low, and you're at the low, and you feel it, and you have to try to get yourself out of it. But the tricky part is there are a lot of times where we don't realize we're maybe not all the way down there at rock bottom. We're just below where we could be, below our optimal level, and we're kind of cruising, and things are cushy. Things still feel pretty good. We've built a pretty good life around ourselves, but we're not at our peak performance. And that is, in my opinion, that's complacency. And there's a phrase that I heard from Ryan Holiday. If you don't know Ryan Holiday, highly recommend you look him up. Great author, great podcast. Ryan Holiday, as far as I know, he's the guy who coined it. Maybe he's not the guy who coined it, but he's the guy I heard it from. I heard this phrase, the velvet rut, right? We always think of, well, when I'm in a rut, I'll feel stuck. But sometimes we end up in a velvet rut, a rut that's lined with beautiful, comfortable fabric. So it doesn't feel that bad. It doesn't feel that bad. We don't really notice how we've kind of let ourselves slip a little bit, right? Because it's usually slow. And we find ourselves in this velvet rut, and it's hard to get out of it because it's kind of comfortable. But we have to find ways to get out of it. And a Tony Robbins thing that I like that he says is, we only change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. Usually it's the other way around. The pain of changing is much greater than the pain of staying the same. So we stay right here. And for example, going to the gym. I have not had a good gym routine for the last few weeks, maybe last month or so. And the idea of me kind of breaking my routine here and trying to squeeze it in after work or before work early in the morning, getting myself out of bed extra early, that seems really painful to me. But there's got to be a point. I have to somehow mentally get myself to a point where I look at myself and say, this is not right. I don't feel good. And this is now more painful than me staying the same, or excuse me, than me changing. Right. So now the idea of getting up to work out, to change myself, that is not as painful now as me staying the same and being in this rut. So we have to find that, get that into that mental space where staying the same feels more painful than changing. And the way to do that is we have to lower that threshold. We have to keep lowering. This is changing. This is us staying the same. We have to keep lowering that threshold so the change doesn't feel so painful anymore. By the way, I have my hands up here on the camera. If you're listening, one hand is up higher than the other. How do we do that? We take small steps. We take small steps. I've mentioned this in a podcast before, and I mentioned this in a lecture that I did recently too. You know, my kids are young; they watch Disney movies, and one of the songs from the movie Frozen 2 is called "The Next Right Thing." And I love that song because she's in this dark place and she doesn't know what to do. And the song is basically, well, I'm just going to do the next right thing. So wherever you are, whatever situation you're in, sometimes it seems insurmountable. The best thing you can do is just the next right thing. So in this case, it might be, you know what? I'm going to drink a glass of water. Okay. Or maybe it's, I'm just going to switch out this meal for something a little bit healthier just this one time. Or maybe it's, I'm going to put my runners by the door. So just if I have that instinct, I can quickly put them on and head out, or whatever it might be. I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk after lunch, whatever, little things. And all of a sudden that threshold starts to come down, come down, come down. And eventually all of a sudden you're like, hang on a second, this is not that hard. Now I don't like the feeling of when I eat that burger or when I don't get up and move. And now all of a sudden the threshold is switched. So do the next right thing. But the lesson is actually to avoid complacency, to avoid the velvet rut. That is lesson number 3. Lesson number 4 that we're bringing in from 2025 into 2026 is to say no. This actually probably should be number 2 because I still think consistency is number 1. Saying no is something that becomes very, very important at some point in your life. You know, I did a podcast early days, probably in the first 3 months, 4 months of starting the podcast. I was lucky enough to go to Arizona for something, and I was around amazing colleagues, and I took the opportunity to record a quick podcast with it was Dr. Justin Bazan, Ryan Court, Will Toe, I think, and Adam Ramsey. Man, all-star cast. It was a great episode, great conversation, and all guys have great energy. But one of the things we shared, and it was, I think, Justin Bazan is really kind of that hard hitting, keep going, keep moving kind of personality. And he said, and I echoed it, say yes now, figure the rest out later. If you look for an opportunity, if you get an opportunity, just say yes and figure the rest out later. I was all about say yes, say yes, say yes. And I think if you're early in your career and if you don't have a ton of other obligations or responsibilities, for example, multiple businesses and 3 children and so on, and a podcast, then say yes, say yes, say yes. And then figure it out later because you have the time, you have the space. And that's how you create the opportunities. And eventually, if all goes well, you have lots of opportunities. And then, unfortunately, you can't keep saying yes, 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 because your plate will be too full and you have to really start to prioritize. And eventually, you realize you have to say no to some things. And I am in that place where I'm trying to learn to say no. You know, funny, I was talking to, coincidentally, Ryan Court a couple of weeks back, and he was kind of asking me if I had any plans for 2026, any resolutions. And Ryan's amazing because he really is a great planner and he likes to set goals and review his goals and all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to learn that from him. But I said, Ryan, you know, my goal for 2026 is I'm going to travel less conferences. I'm going to do less and focus more on the core things that I really want to grow in my life. And he said, that's awesome, Harbir. But if I remember correctly, you said the same thing to me last year. And he was right. And I love that he called me out on it because I did say the same thing to him at the end of 2024. And lo and behold, you know, air miles galore on Air Canada because I'm in all these different places for all these conferences because I can't say no. So this year, certainly that's one of my big goals is to be able to say no. And one idea I want to adopt that I've heard, and I'm sure you've probably heard this too, is it's either hell yes or hell no. And I think I have to make it really black and white. And I think many of us have to look at it that way. Because a lot of times we'll say, oh, that seems like a pretty good idea. I think I could probably do that. Let me see. Well, you know, it's a couple months out. I'll put it on my calendar. I think by the time it comes around, I'll feel pretty good about it. No, either you're super energized and enthusiastic and ready to do it right now, or you're not going to do it. That's the type of mentality I'm trying to bring into 2026. And a friend of mine told me years ago, kind of dovetailing off the hell yes, hell no, is would you say yes to this if this opportunity was tomorrow? If this speaking opportunity or this lecture or this whatever engagement it is that you might be invited to, if it was happening tomorrow or the day after, like almost immediately, would you do it? Or is your plate too full right now for you to do it? Because chances are 2 months from now, your plate's going to be the same, if not more full. So if you wouldn't be like, hell yeah, I'm so excited to do that for this week, then chances are you're not going to feel that way a couple months from now, and you shouldn't do it. And so that's another way of me kind of looking into that. I have a few other anecdotes on this I want to share with you. Okay. I love this theory. And again, think I heard this from Ryan Holiday on looking at time as money, thinking about time like money, credits and debits in a bank account. Your time is, once it's spent, you can't get it back. So if you say yes to something now, you're taking that time out of your bank, you're giving it away, and you're never going to get it back. Whereas if you say no, it stays in your bank and you get to use it at a different time. And I love that perspective. I love that idea of, looking at your time on a balance sheet at the end of the month. How well did you spend it, and how do you want to budget your time in the future? And there's a phrase that kind of comes out of the financial sort of spectrum, but I think it applies here as well. I want to give credit to Chris Turcott, who's a friend of mine who came on the podcast as well, finance guy, and he shared this on his Instagram page, I think, at one point. But he said, the quote was, just because you can make the payment doesn't mean you can afford the thing. And I had to let that settle in for a second. Just because you can make the payment doesn't mean you can afford the thing, right? Just because I can say yes and give the time away doesn't mean I can actually afford to do that. Because when time comes up, and this has happened to me over and over again, happened in 2025, it comes up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm away 4 out of 4 weeks, 4 out of 4 weekends in November, plus some in between days in there because I said yes to all these things. And initially it seemed like I could say yes. Initially it seemed like I could spend that time. And then all of a sudden I'm away from home. I have no time with family and I can't actually afford it, it turns out. So I love that quote. Just because you can make the payment doesn't mean you can afford the thing. All right. So that was lesson number 4, is saying no and budgeting your time wisely. Lesson number 5. This one I'm going to keep pretty short. And it's an obvious one. We've all heard it a million times, but I'm really, as I get older, as time goes on, and as I get busier, I feel like this resonates more and more with me. And that is, asking yourself, who do you spend time with? Being more intentional about the people that you spend time with. And there's various ways to look at this. You've heard the quote, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And that can be looked at in many ways. Financially, if you spend your time around wealthy people or not so wealthy people. What about productivity wise? Do you spend your time around people who are complacent and are not go-getters? Or do you spend your time around people who are, they're making the most of their time, they're energized, they're efficient? What about, do you spend your time around people who ask great questions? Why is this way? How could I make this better? What if I did it like this? What am I doing wrong right now? Do you spend your time around people who are thinkers, who ask those questions? Do you spend your time around people who are sharing energy, or do you spend your time around people who are sucking your energy? These are all really important questions you need to ask yourself and be more intentional in 2026 about who you spend time with. I'm finding as time goes on, my circle is getting smaller. I'm more intentional with the time that I spend with the people. I've been very, very fortunate through no special talent or effort of my own. I've been very blessed to form a very close group of 5 people who I talk to every single day. And they've been my friends and family, core group for a decade or more. And I know I can trust them. This is what I encourage anybody who maybe doesn't quite have this, is try to cultivate this. A group of people that you can have zero boundaries with, zero barriers with, total trust in, that you can throw an idea. You're not going to be embarrassed. Maybe they'll razz you because that's what the group is. You understand, in that group, you will get razzed. You'll get made fun of from time to time. But at the end of the day, they have your best interest at heart. They're going to tell you if something's a good idea or not a good idea, or give you their most honest opinion either way, because that's what's going to help you grow. And you share ideas with each other. Ultimately, that's what I would encourage you to try to cultivate for yourself. And, I've had that group outside of the profession for years. This is just my core friend group, but trying to create something within the profession like that, I think can be super valuable as well. Who can you go to when it's a business question, an optometry question? Are there people that you can turn to that no questions asked? They'll take the time to help you and give you unfiltered advice so you can make sure that you're growing, and you can do the same. Of course, that's the whole point of this, is that you would exchange that same energy with them. So be really intentional. That's lesson number 5 that I'm bringing into 2026, is to be really intentional who I spend time with, who I share my energy with. Lesson number 6, the sixth and final lesson that I'm bringing in from 2025 into 2026, is to value myself, and to say to you to value yourselves, for us to value ourselves, uh, personally, professionally, as in clinic, in practice, and professionally meaning broader, nationally, globally, as a profession, as an industry, to value ourselves. You know what? This could easily go to number 1 as well. To value ourselves, I think this is maybe one. This is, well, it's my top 6 lessons that I'm bringing into 2026. This is such a huge thing. This goes back to the topic of scope optimization, and why those conversations are so important, is because we truly need to value ourselves as optometrists, as a profession. But if we kind of zoom in and we bring it down to a personal level, we each need to value ourselves. We need to, hence going back to the time and saying, no, we need to value our time. In practice, in clinic, we need to value our professional time. We need to charge accordingly for our fees and services, and not to feel bad about it. I think optometrists, we're the type of people, we want to give, we want to help. And it's a great trait to have. Unfortunately, it's to our own detriment, right? We're willing to do things for free. We're willing to do things at a discount because we just want to help that person in front of us. But the problem is, we understand this concept, that if we do things at a discount, often we are looked upon, we're devalued, our services are devalued, right? This is only going to continue to be devalue our profession and the services that we provide if we are not charging according. And it's not just about money, it's really just about making sure we feel fully compensated for the time and effort that we're putting in. Just think about, would you give your full effort if you knew you're only going to get paid half of what you think you deserve? Chances are no. Chances are perhaps you'll give more than 50% of what your effort is. You might give 75, but I highly doubt you'll go to 100% of your full effort if you know you're not going to get compensated accordingly. There's a couple of stories I like to share on this. And listen, these are lessons that I'm learning myself. I'm bringing this into 2026. I'm not preaching this. This is a lesson I'm bringing into 2026 that I'm still either needing to learn, or I feel like I need to keep top of mind so I can be successful this year. So I am as guilty as anybody else for not, perhaps charging accordingly, or not valuing myself appropriately. But there's a couple of stories I like to share on this that I've heard that I think are really great anecdotes to help kind of put some context around this whole thing. There's a story about Picasso, the painter, the artist, and somebody ran into him in a shop somewhere and said, "Oh my God, Picasso, you're amazing. I love your work. Would you?" They struck up a conversation. He took the time to talk, and then the person said, "Oh my gosh, would you just? Here's a piece of paper. Could you just draw something for me, please? I'd love that. It would be amazing. I would keep it forever. It would be an amazing keepsake for me." Picasso takes a piece of paper, says, "Sure." Takes a minute, draws something on it, and says, "Okay, that'll be $10,000." And the person about to grab that piece of paper is kind of like, "Whoa, what do you mean $10,000? Just took you a minute to draw that." And Picasso says, "Yeah, it took me a minute to draw it, but it took me a lifetime to be able to draw this in a minute. It took me a lifetime to develop the skill to be able to create this in just 1 minute." And that's where the value is. It's in the skill. It's in the time spent developing that skill. There's another story in the same vein that I just love to share. And there's, put yourself in this position here. We're in a power plant that's just about to explode. Everything's going crazy. All the buttons are flashing. All the red lights are spinning, and people are running around trying to shut this thing down. All the experts are coming in. The upper management coming in, trying to press all the buttons and punch in all the code and trying to turn all the keys, and they just can't figure it out. So they call an expert in. "We need your help. Help us before this thing explodes." So the expert comes in, takes a look around, walks over to the keyboard, presses a key, and everything shuts off. All the lights shut off, all the blaring alarms shut off, and everybody's able to take a breath. And he hands him an invoice, and an invoice says $10,000. 10,000, just an easy number that's coming to mind. It probably was a different number for Picasso and a different number for this guy coming in the power plant, but $10,000. They said, what, $10,000? You walked in here, looked for a minute and pressed one button and everything stopped. How's that $10,000? We need to itemize this. You got to tell us exactly where this $10,000 came from. So he took the thing back and he scribbled on it and he handed the invoice over one more time. And he broke it down. It said, pressing the button, $1. Knowing which button to press, $9,999. And I love that story. And you've probably heard it, but man, I love that story. And that again goes back to the skill, the knowledge. Why would you call that person if you didn't need his knowledge? You could push a button, but you need his knowledge. And that's the same reason people come to us. They don't need to come to us to just spin some dials. They need our knowledge. They need our expertise. And we need to value ourselves, again, in the clinic, but again, professionally, when we're having conversations with the government, insurance companies, when we're negotiating, we need to value ourselves. And listen, I applaud our associations across the country. BCDO, I'm always speaking so highly of BCDO, but I look across the country at the other associations who are working hard, fighting hard, negotiating hard to kind of push our profession forward, to continue to help our profession grow and thrive. They're not being complacent. They are being consistent, and they are continuing to try to value our profession more greatly so we can continue to grow. So big thank you to all of our associations and everybody who keeps working hard for us to make optometry, continue to have optometry to grow and thrive in the future. And I want you to do the same. So please, this year in 2026, try to value yourself highly and, put yourself out in the world in a way that you feel valued as well. And people see you as that person that you want to be seen as. All right. That was lesson number 6, to value ourselves as highly as possible. We'll go through it one more time. The 6 lessons that I'm bringing into 2026 from 2025. Number 1 is consistency is key. Number 2 is to not live your life like each day was the last, but to live your life like you're going to be living the same day over and over again. Number 3 is to avoid complacency or that velvet rut. Number 4 is to learn to say no, to avoid doing the things that you will dread in the future. Number 5 is to be more intentional with who you spend time with, who you share your energy with. And number 6 is to value yourself more and to value our profession more. I hope these 6 lessons resonated, or at least one of them resonated with you. It might be something that you could take into your personal life, your professional life, to help you have an amazing year ahead. Once again, I want to say a huge, huge, huge thank you to everybody who listens, everybody who supports in all these different ways. Thank you for helping the podcast grow. Thank you for spending your time with me here. I'm looking forward to sharing so much more amazing content with you in this year coming up. I may not be able to put out 40 episodes again, but I'm going to try. Now, listen, if there was even one thing here that resonated with you, do me a favor, take a screenshot, put it up on Instagram on your stories, and share that one thing, one lesson that I'm bringing into 2026 that resonated with you, or put it on LinkedIn or somewhere. Tag me. Make sure you let me know. I really want to reshare it. I want to let everybody know that these lessons are actually resonating with you guys out there. Once again, thank you so much for listening and watching to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.